I also have started doing this here, which it doesn't seem like I can actually see it now. Maybe I have to be louder. But you can see the levels on there. It's nothing as interesting as what we were talking about eventually doing. Maybe I have to turn it up here. No, it didn't seem to matter. Hello, check. Testing. Well, it's clearly working. Oh, there it was. There it goes. So you can see when I talk, you can see the levels on there.
Oh, yeah.
So I just thought, in the camera shot while we're doing that. And
Gotcha.
Man, when I'm going back and editing these, Levi is just talking so loudly, and you're just like, you're just normal is like to just yell, and I'm just like, that messes up the sound. It really honestly messes up the sound because you get a ton more echo. So I'm listening when him and I are talking, especially up there in the Nook or whatever we're calling it. I can literally hear more echo on his voice. There's also a thing where if there's background noise, cutting it out is harder for him because his voice, he's yelling, so it's like it takes up more time in audio sense. It's interesting, but it makes it so when you do you'll do like they call it auto gate, and what happens is when I take a pause in between, the sound drops out completely, so you don't get the hum of the background. Works for me, doesn't work for him.
I see.
For him, it's just this all constant hiss behind what he's saying.
I see.
It's kind of weird. You know what's interesting now is things are up pretty loud. I'll turn up that microphone.
Ooh, wow.
But listen, no radio.
True.
And here's the thing: everything is coiled. Levi and I noticed that the other day that we were trying to uncoil everything. Remember when you look it up?
Yeah.
We looked it up too because we were having way more problems up in the top. And then I was coiling these things up just to keep them more organized on the cart. And then I was like, well, we'll just keep it coiled and see if it makes a difference. And it seems like it almost completely defeats the radio thing. Like it's like the thing that you're not supposed to do.
Have you tested this by uncoiling these?
No, I guess I could do that, but it just seems like we haven't had any problem.
They also look like thicker insulated or just thicker cables.
These are supposed to be better cables, but right away when we tried them on the landing up there, is that they seem to pick up the radio stations great. So, even though they're not supposed to do that. But
no, it sounds great though.
My favorite part is that they're different colors.
Yeah.
So instantly I can tell you're the green one.
Yeah. No, I dig it.
So okay, well we have a million things to talk about, but let's just try to keep it as much to this podcast, I guess. I'm trying to just focus on that. Is that what you think, or something else?
When we say this podcast, you mean do we have a title or
That's what I'm saying.
So if I look back, and we've had the recurring theme that this is a kind of peek behind the curtain of what's going on, for you, for me, for the Foundry, and I thought that maybe the birth of a podcast would be an interesting topic, and people who are interested in getting into it can kind of feel our pain or avoid the pitfalls or learn from the tips and tricks that we're getting, like having mics that have individual volume adjustment, having where you host it. What's the purpose of a podcast? Do you make it one branded forever thing, or do you say, hey, we're going to break this up into a 3-series or a 6-episode series, which gives you a little more freedom? So I think people just listening in on that without necessarily a structured, bulleted outline is a value.
So specifically, here's the thing. So like S-Town is this new podcast that is from other people. They've done Serial in the past and This American Life. And maybe they literally did strike out on their own. Maybe they're like, we don't want all the same people. Just a couple of us are going to do this. But either way, the problem with making the problem with not making it its own channel, continuing podcast thing, is that you might lose people in between. I mean, I guess you could do all the work you want to say, hey, we have another thing going on. We have another thing. Make sure you go check it out. But if people are following, because it's all based on RSS feeds. So when I subscribe to your podcast, it's just I automatically get the new ones. And so if you have a 3-part series and then now you have another 3-part series and you're calling it something else or it's a different set of people or whatever, it's not going to show up automatically, and so you're going to lose some people.
I'm taking notes here, not emailing.
Sure, no, I know.
And that's where I think we have to put the horse in front of the cart and ask ourselves, is the goal as many listeners as possible? And I think if this were our only thing and we were trying to monetize it, selling T-shirts, sponsorships, then that's a more important thing. I consider this almost an amenity to being part of the broader community of, specifically here, the Idea Foundry, and then more broadly, the Central Ohio Tech and Creative community. So if you're a legit dues-paying member, card-carrying member of the Idea Foundry, then here's a way to listen in, and that's kind of fun, and call it a perk. If you're someone who likes us in Columbus on Facebook or what have you, you don't necessarily take classes or you're not a member, this is an interesting peek again. So I don't yet see us making a buck from this. Like if 1 million people were listening, I'm not sure what we'd do with that.
Well, and in general, my stance on making money is always a happy byproduct, especially when it comes to this kind of thing. So I think that's fine if we think about that ahead of time. I know that Levi, with our other podcast, where he was like, "Oh, now how do we get people to listen to it?" I was like, "I think we just make a great thing and concentrate on that."
Yeah.
And the people that find it are good. I mean, I'm not saying completely hide it on the internet, but so you're specifically thinking that, and I think this is correct, that we aren't trying to get as many people as possible. We aren't trying to get sponsorships or something. I mean, I guess eventually it could happen. I mean,
and of course we're looking for sponsorships.
If we just completely capture Columbus's maker community, I don't know how many people that would be in the greater Columbus area. It could be, it's less than 1 million, let's say. And so if we just completely capture that, and someone on the global scale was like, you guys should really scale up and do the whole country or the whole nation or the whole whatever it is, the whole continent, the English-speaking world. All right, fine. We'll tackle that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, or whatever. It's not really a big deal. But I think you're right. I think we just think of it as Columbus. I was telling you about my idea for Meet Your Maker was Columbus Makers. And that was a pretty broad term. My dad, the person who made a business, was like that. Or Blake Compton is a maker. Or Nate from Pursuit he made Pursuit. He made a business. So you just bring him in, talk to him about it, that kind of thing. And I think that the audience for that could be outside of Columbus, but it was more specifically Columbus.
No, yeah, and people always love real examples. And just came back from this Purdue Innovation Summit a few days ago, and one of the things that was a value takeaway from co-working spaces, maker spaces, is that it's increasingly important for people who want to strike out on their own to see people who look like them, who they can empathize with, and say, "Hey, 3 years ago, you started your business 3 years ago. Now you've landed. You look like I did 3 years back." So I think to hear from regular people is a help. The other thing, we've tried to expand the definition of what a makerspace is here. So to expand making beyond 3D printing and welding and blacksmithing and woodworking to mean making a graphic art asset, making a website, making a business plan, or actually making a business. And I think eventually we'll see a new term of art come to describe a place like a makerspace, because I think that visually is a little, or linguistically brings to mind a vision that is a little hardware heavy, which is fine. But I think there's more to the success of a hardware heavy business than just the product, and I think that's what we're capturing.
I also personally have been thinking lately that that's like a little small-minded. No offense to people who make a physical object, but it's like you can only reach so many people with that. And you know what I mean?
You can say this from a point of perspective because you make things for a living.
Yes, that's true. I always have had a bias towards making physical things. I like that. I do like physical things, and I've made websites and all kinds of stuff like that, and digital things. The scale is much larger on the digital side, but I just think that sometimes it's like we could sort of what you're saying in the business sense of the Idea Foundry or makerspace in general is you can only go so far making physical objects.
Yeah, and it's harder, like you say, scale. I think what you mean by that is there's a broader market for digital things, for a website, for a song, what have you. But one of the things that, again, at this Innovation Summit, by the way, really impressed with Purdue and this whole thing, some amazing speakers. But they said, look, a lot of software companies want to get into the Internet of Things kind of gig, and there's a lot of value there. They said, somewhere you have to make the things. And it was interesting to hear that there is more and more an overlap between the tech and the software and the hardware. I like to joke nowadays even a hammer has an app. And so I think by marrying the digital and the physical, it makes a lot of sense. So talking about themes, if we say, let's talk about things we're passionate about and hopefully people are interested and listen. And then the point of this podcast or this series or the overarching theme of this collection of podcasts we have is a peek behind the curtain. Then maybe we start each podcast by asking, what is it that people don't know about something here, or what is a little bit fuzzy or foggy?
That's interesting. I don't know if you have a lot of experience seeing the Facebook. I know you're, especially since November, you've been trying to stay off Facebook. But the Facebook,
November 9th specifically.
Very specifically. On Facebook Live, people can ask questions. If we just were live right now, we could see questions.
Totally agree.
That's an interesting thing that if we wanted to do that, if we just opened it up from the beginning and we're just like, hey, we have 2 or 3 people here and just ask questions. What do you want to know about the Idea Foundry? Do you want to, it doesn't even matter. It literally doesn't matter. Bring up a class, we'll field it. If you ask something weird or inappropriate, we'll handle it. But, ask about a class that we're not doing or you want us to do or we already do and you don't know about.
What I like about that is that it fits one of the criticisms you had about we're not a live phenomenon, so you can't ask people directly.
Yeah.
2, I think we're looking to find a way to communicate with the entire city to ask these kinds of questions. So not just for a podcast, but if, as you said, we want to find out if we have 30 instructors and each of them can teach 10 or 20 classes, we're not going to launch 600 untested classes.
Yeah.
So we'd rather find out what people do. For giggles, right now, I am actually going to go to the members' Facebook page for the Idea Foundry, tell people, you and I are podcasting right now, and say, hey, are there any questions or is there anything you think might be of interest to folks who don't know something is going on here?
Sure, just
and
as a
would like
test.
to. And within the next 5-10 minutes, we'll probably get a couple kitschy replies and maybe something valuable.
Yes,
I wonder too if people would hear me typing. Yeah.
Well, we're not doing this part live. We'll do it later, but I could barely hear you typing.
Okay.
You have a pretty soft keyboard. Something I've noticed about you. But I get what I was going to.
I've been working out.
I was going to make a prediction that Zach Bacon says something. He is one of our members that just like can't resist making a joke. So if someone says something and there's just like a joke floating in the air, he's got to be the one.
And Tom Williams for the puns also.
Yeah, Tom Williams has one of my favorite puns of all time that literally broke my brain. Was we were making a steam themed, like a steam Zeppelin themed pinball machine from scratch, and he comes in and he said, and he was like adding something now that was like related to the steam of it or whatever, and it was like fogging it up, and he goes, "Oh, the humidity." So funny. I mean, the steam part and the Zeppelin, and oh my God, I just was like, Tom, that's genius.
Yeah.
That was so funny. And he was like, oh, I mean, it's pretty funny. But I was like, man, you nailed it. You knocked it out of the park. I'm trying to go to the Idea Foundry members page and see if I can see them as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to craft the right question. Back to that. I'm sorry, this Facebook post is so long. I didn't have time to write a short one. Hey crew, Dylan and I are podcasting right now, and we like to chat about things that people are curious about at the Foundry.
Or you could just say we're just taking any questions or something like that. We want to try it out. We want to try taking questions, see how it goes. I know one of the things that I follow is called Roadkill. It's a car show, and they do this where on Instagram and Facebook they say we're doing on every Friday actually. They answer questions on Fridays, Q&A Friday, and they ask for questions. Maybe the day before or whatever that day. Sometimes they're themes. Sometimes they're like, hey, we want to know about questions about drag racing specifically or some other part of what they do. But then they just have a bunch of questions, and then he goes on live. He goes and records it. It's not live. They sometimes do it live. And then he'll just look through the comments and answer questions as they come up. But they get the exact same questions every time, too. They're sick of answering, when are you coming to my town? Because they're just everywhere.
I'm having trouble phrasing this question rapidly. My inclination is to hit pause, take 60 seconds, and think on this, just because I don't want the dead air time while I ponder.
And you don't want me to distract you.
I was going to ask if you want to just talk about a brand new parking lot.
We do have a brand new parking lot.
Give me 30 seconds here.
I can see it from here. It's. I thought it was going to be more gravel, but it's more of like a fine cindery dust, which is cool. One of our major problems here, we are people would know this, but we are in Franklinton. And since we already decided we would be more for Columbus people, we are just west of Cosi on State Street, 421 West State Street. And parking is one of the biggest problems that we've faced until really today. The new parking lot was open or started yesterday and finished today. And I already see people parking in it. But we have, what do we say? We have 400 members?
About that.
So in this building, 400 members, if a quarter of those people all came at once, we'd be in trouble parking-wise. So now we'd be fine with this giant new lot. We have a blacksmith-specific building out there, and people have been parking all around it for a long time, and tearing up the grass and stuff. So now it's exactly where you want it to be. I personally drove my motorcycle today, so I didn't have to worry about parking. I got caught in the rain a little bit because my weather app was just a bit ambitious on whether or not it would rain. And they said it would be done at 1, but I left about 1:30 and it was still raining. But now it's beautiful, so I'm looking forward to driving home. But yeah, so what our goal is here eventually is to do live broadcasts, so that we can go on Facebook Live or YouTube Live or possibly both at the same time and answer people's questions, talk about the Idea Foundry, just give a behind-the-scenes look at what we do here. Like I said, there are 400 members, and we've got some serious talent here. We've got some very interesting people, and it's just the kind of thing where we'll bring in some people. It's a Friday afternoon and have them chat about what they do. You would be amazed. Not Alex, he of course knows, but the general public person would really be amazed by some of the things going on here at the Idea Foundry. We have a company that just makes video games. We have a lot of web design people. We have some IT people working out of here, marketing people. We have, I don't even know what they do, but they do something with vision, and they invented, they had a part in the Google Glass. We have people that do virtual reality, 3D printing, all kinds of crazy businesses. We have these guys over there that, from what I can tell, all they do is drones, and they just fly drones all the time, and they're making parts for the drones. That's Chris and Will. They're local tech heroes, and they're matching up education and technology people so that they can solve some problems that sort of the education people might have and the technology people can solve. But yeah, the Idea Foundry is an amazing place for stuff like that. Alex used to say we are a solution looking for a problem. So it's the kind of thing where people are like, man, there's got to be a way to do this kind of thing. And here we are sitting here knowing how to do a thing, but not realizing that someone out there has that problem. And so that's the kind of thing that we're just like looking for those questions all the time.
So do you know Mike Rowe, Dylan?
Sure, I sure do.
Did you see, he used to be a QVC announcer.
No, I didn't know.
And one of the interview questions they gave him, and you can follow it on YouTube, actually you can watch it, it's a 25-year-old video, is talk about this pencil. And a challenge that people have is to fill the time with something interesting, engaging, and accurate about that thing. And he was amazing at it, and you're amazing at this too. I didn't think you could talk for 3 minutes straight about relevant stuff, and it was hard for me not to listen to that. So I encourage everyone to check out the Mike Rowe describe this pencil kind of thing.
I was too interesting.
Yeah, but and the other thing, we've talked about the hazards of a, what do you call the touch-sensitive pad on a laptop?
Trackpad, is that right?
Yeah, the thing that I can slide around, capacitive touch. So I had finally concocted the Facebook post, and then I accidentally deleted it all with a slight move of my thumb, so reposted it.
I don't use trackpads that often, but I've been using them here more often, working on a laptop as opposed to my computer at home. And man, I find that to be a constant problem. Or like finding exactly, the more modern ones don't actually have buttons. It's just that portion of it is the left and right click. And I find that like finding that exact click is hard for me sometimes. And I'll right click and drag and I'll mess everything up.
100%.
Yeah.
And it was Nick Lalopoulos, our director of technology and education here at the Foundry. Really interesting guy. He's the one who also taught me that there are settings where you can tell it how many millimeters above this. Whoa. I was shocked at all the things that you can do with these. But hey, Dylan Paul liked my comment.
Yeah, I'm trying to follow it.
And
what Nick showed me today was his 3D mouse. Have you seen that?
Yeah, no. He talked about buying one.
It looks cool. It looked okay. It was $100 or something. He said, and I was saying, so like Levi, for example, works at Roto Studio designing things. And I know he's constantly in 3D, whatever CAD program, SolidWorks specifically. And for $100 to save time throughout the day, that's a no-brainer for the company, I would assume. I always thought, what is a really interesting question? Did I ever tell you this one? That when I worked at my last company, they were talking about here's like your budget for when I first got there, it was websites, so I needed a computer, and they said here's your budget for a computer or whatever, just spec out whatever you want and we'll buy it. And the funny thing I was thinking, it wasn't a huge budget, but I was actually thinking I got 2 monitors too because I was like that's all I really care about. For websites you really don't need that fast of a computer. But I was like, here's an interesting question that made me think of is if you ask someone who works a normal desk job, would you rather have whatever it is, a $2,000 raise or have the fastest computer? And everyone says computer.
That's
everyone that I
That's
asked.
interesting.
And I thought that's so funny that it's not. I mean, you get paid. Most people get paid by the hour. I guess so you're talking about these people. All the people I asked got paid by the hour. I think that's an important stipulation. I guess if you're salary, it's like, well, yeah, give me the faster thing, right? It's more of an easy question if you're salary. But if you're paid by the hour, I think most people who work on a computer all day would rather have a much faster computer. And you would think as an employer, you want that too.
So I'm taking a few notes here on Twitch for entrepreneurs. Okay.
Twitch? What?
That's a note. I'm putting a pin in here. So yeah, I really like a fast computer, fast laptop, and I've noticed it's not just waiting for the application to load or them to save. My own workflow, if I load Google Drive and it's taken a half a second for the folders to come up, I quickly switch to Facebook to fill the 3 seconds that is doing, and then suddenly I get sucked down. This post, or I go to a news site or something like that. Although I'm not going to news sites these days, and suddenly it's a vastly outsized impact on your productivity beyond the. Okay, if I have a computer that's 10% faster, is that really going to make a difference? Well, it will, just because it stops. It prevents me from being distracted.
Did you see the comment that came in? Did you want to talk about it?
Yeah, that was a good comment. Actually, I'm going to repeat the comment that I think we do need the what do you call the cough button or something like that?
Okay. You had said that, and you maybe had mentioned that during Jack's podcast.
Yeah.
Do you think that's correct?
Well, is there a way to turn the mic off right now? Because I need to clear my throat.
No, you just move away from it. Because we could do the cough button, but each mic would have to have its own. We would have to. What it would be a place where this XLR would plug in, and it would just cut.
I see. Or just an etiquette where what you just said is fine.
Yeah, but I don't know if I could how much that you can hear that on there. If we were doing it live, I wouldn't care. If this was an official podcast, Here's the interesting thing about the multi-track is that the other day, Levi was saying something funny, and he might have originally interrupted me, but I talked over him a bit. And what I did was I went back into the track, turned mine down, so you can actually see me move my mouth, but I'm just saying like or just it's nothing important.
Interesting.
And I turned my audio down, and his was so much easier to follow. And I was like, that's exactly why you do the multi-track recording.
I see.
It's stuff like that where if I talked over you or right there, if you cough, I can just turn yours way down. You might hear it a small amount in mine, but it won't be as obtrusive as it would.
And this is where I'm such a huge fan of learning by doing, which is why I'm glad, hey, let's just jump in, buy the gear, find out we need different cables, find out we need the multi-track, and then pay those things forward. Also discovering, even right now, we've been struggling a little bit about should we bullet list, should we outline each of these things, should we have a whole series of titles ahead of time? Now it occurred to me, why radio hosts, why podcast people
yes.
Answer questions. It's a whole lot easier because I can just sit here and react rather than proact. Yeah, and B, we know it's on target with at least the fraction of the audience who's calling in. This makes me really curious about how representative the people who call in are to the.
There's always
folks.
some of that, and I'm usually not the kind of person who would ask a question or something on this, but I might for this community. The whole point, I think, and it's interesting the questions that we have so far. I feel like we want to be approachable. That's sort of what part of this is that you want the Idea Foundry to feel approachable. That's some of what I was talking about lately with onboarding. You want people to feel like they can come in here and use the Idea Foundry in the way it was intended without feeling weird about it.
Yep.
The other day I was talking to someone, and I'm not going to mention their name specifically because of this reason, but they said they felt intimidated working down in the wood shop. And it's been so long since I have felt that way until when I came back. The first couple of days, I felt like no one knows that I know what I'm doing here, so they're going to be extra paying attention. A new guy goes on the table saw. It's not, and I do this too. That sounds like the beginning of a joke. A guy walks into a table saw. So the other day, or if I walk by and I see someone, I consider myself an expert of, well, I guess a lot of things, but like machining and metalwork and stuff like that. So if I walk by and it seems like someone is having a problem with the mill, or they're not doing something right, or they're doing something in a way that seems like they might need some help, I would love to help them. And you try to do it in the best kind of way where you're not coming off as, hey, I noticed you needed my help.
Yeah.
So I just ask them what they're doing, how's it going, and usually they'll tell me, I don't know what I'm doing here. I thought I could figure this out, but I'm really stuck. So that's no problem. But you do have to kind of peek out, give them a side eye about, does this guy kind of know what he's doing? And that part, I think, is a little intimidating. If these guys, some of those guys down there, I saw a table down there, or a bench or something. It was beautiful today. Yesterday, Eric was making a great table, and it's like, these guys are professionals. These are elite woodworkers, and maybe just using the table saw next to those guys, I could see that being intimidating.
What's really interesting here, too, if we're agreeing that the theme of this podcast, or a series of them, is a peek behind the curtain, even these questions are making me think of things that I didn't realize we're doing. So I'm getting a peek behind the curtain. So to think that it never occurred to me that someone might be intimidated working alongside someone who's really good. I thought that's a perk. Like, I'm going to work for that person. And even the fact that I don't think our newer members know that we have a semi-formal agreement amongst staff members and a few members that we call member mentors, who are experienced folks in the workstations, the welding shop, the laser shop, the wood shop, whom we've explicitly said, hey, look, please keep an eye on these folks. And we recognize that in order to be accessible and approachable, we teach theory light, practice heavy classes. We'll teach a welding class in 3 hours. That's not going to make you confident or competent. So the first few times you come in, we'll look over your shoulders. But I say that on the tours. I tell people, but I don't know if they really know. There is actually a safety net of people who are sympathetic to folks, because we all started somewhere. But it didn't occur to me that that even working along someone really talented is an issue. One thing we're curious about with respect to communicating politeness and civility, coming up with an agreed upon common language, kind of like how you just told me how to cough, just point away from the microphone. Clarity is such a helpful thing. Some folks really do like talking. And we've got some retirees, we've got some people who are here just for fun, and then we have other folks who are here running their business, and they want to be all business. So we've struggled a bit with, how do you create a culture where it's okay for people to say, hey, look, don't talk to me right now, I'm working. And one of the analogies I think I may have mentioned is the Brazilian barbecue. You ever been to one of those restaurants?
Yeah, the churrascaria.
Go
ahead, I've heard of
Portuguese now too. Where if you haven't been to one of these, they're fantastic places that have all sorts of meat and food, and they just keep bringing it to your table. If you have, and everyone has a medallion. If it's green, it's face up. Keep bringing me food. Once you're full, you turn it red and you stop. And so we've kicked around the idea of having something at your workbench or your workstation, some kind of visual indicator that is like the medallion. Say, hey, come ask me about my question. About my project. I'd love to chat. Or the other side, rather than just stay away, say, hey, look, I'm busy. Catch me at the bar or catch me at the coffee shop.
Yeah. In yoga, they have a version of this where different teachers do different things, but we've talked about this, but where it's basically a coaster that has an obvious one side and another side. And it's basically, I don't care for instruction right now. Like, I'm in my own zone here. if I'm doing something wrong, it's on me.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then the other side is, hey, I'm wide open to criticism or correction or whatever. I need some help. So that would be an interesting thing if we had that down there. Or, I had mentioned something like office hours. I think that would be a cool eventual goal because I see a lot of the traffic on Facebook is people saying, hey, I'm doing a woodworking project. It might be a little bit over my head. I'm coming in Saturday. Can anyone be there to help me? That sounds like a very common. I'm paraphrasing, but that sounds. I've heard that 3 or 4 times.
Today there was one for woodworking.
Yeah, and so woodworking's common. Welding is also another one where it's like I don't know I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm not sure about the settings on the machine. Welding is one of those where the first 4 or 5 times you're going to forget the gas or to turn this part up, and you're not going to know why you just sucked today.
Yeah.
And you were great yesterday, and the real reason is the gas is different, or there's so many variables when it comes to welding as far as wire speed and voltage and all that stuff. So I guess it's amperage in that sense. But anyway, I feel like this experiment is going well. We already have 5 or 6 questions. Here's what I think we should do since we're not actually live. I think if we're going to answer a question, we'll phrase it out right now. We'll say, okay, we're gonna read out this question. We're gonna answer. Then we can edit it as here was the answer to that question. Put it on there later. Do you think?
As you mean in audio or in text on Facebook?
Well, in video. In video.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's a great idea.
We'll take this, and it will. Maybe we can even do the captions if you want to get crazy. But we could just have it. The whole title of this video is. So the first question here was. Well, let's use this as an example because I think it's silly to even answer it. But Blake being the mischievous jokester that he is, asked. I'm sure he's asking Alex, when did you start shaving your head? And so, if we wanted to, the title of this video would say, when did Alex start shaving his head? And then it's just something we post, whatever, a week from now or something on there, spread them out. And then it's a full video from beginning to end. Maybe we even put the logo at the beginning and end. But if we want to answer a real question, I think you do the same thing. And then obviously there are things people... That's a funny thing too, where the last question says, how do we hear about the podcast? Please answer here, not on the podcast. That would be cruel.
Here on Facebook. Yeah, that's
funny too.
Yeah. And just today I saw it was a Wired video with Samuel Jackson answering the most common questions about Samuel Jackson that people punch into Google. It was hysterical. It's great. So
that is funny. But I see this having some real legs when I told you I needed that adapter to be able to do the good sound. If we try to do Facebook Live video right now, the sound is terrible. So we need better sound. We'll run that cable out there, and I really think this could be something people are into.
And I agree. I just took my headphones off for a sec to get my laptop power supply. And even listening to you just speaking in the room without the headphones on now, I agree. Do you have I can
underneath, over here.
I got the one behind me. We are looking for an...
I'll just play the role of the interviewer here because I feel like you're going to be the interviewee, and I'll, of course, have something to... I can't imagine me having nothing to say. So... the first question is from Chet Ridenour, who is a member here. I actually maybe I saw him today, but I definitely saw him yesterday. He has an office down the hall. And he asks, what's the history of the Idea Foundry building? What did it used to be? Who actually owns the Idea Foundry? And what's the long-term vision once it's fully realized? So I guess the easy one is, what did it used to be? What's the history of the building?
Yeah, and a little bit about Chet, too. So Chet's a longtime Columbus stalwart. He's also the manager, I'm not wholly sure what his exact title is, of Car2Go in Columbus. And since Columbus won a Smart City, Smart Community grant from the feds, mobility and getting people to and from work, to and from school, to and from the grocery store, for everyone is an important thing. And Car2Go represents one of those kind of slivers of the pie that might address a certain sector. I know a few folks here in Columbus who actually don't have a car and rely exclusively on Car2Go. This is not a paid endorsement. We just like Chet and we like that service. But history of the building. And lastly, too, these are, again, questions that I think are so close to our faces that it wouldn't occur to us if this is something that's interesting to other people. So I'm glad to do this exercise. about 100 years ago, this building was built. It was the Godman Shoe Company, and we found, I think, the first bill of sale that we found in the auditor's records was from the 19-teens. So we're coming up on our century anniversary for the space, and the Godman Shoe Company. Actually, East Franklinton used to be a big shoe industry. They did so well, they created the Godman Guild, which is a nonprofit settlement house, still in, or community house, here in Columbus and Milo Grogan, very close to our old location. And they still do a lot of work with teens, with education, as a community center. It's my voting station. And we did an event with them back in January, which was National Volunteer Month, where about 50 folks, 25 kids and 25, it was National Mentorship Month. I don't know if I said that or volunteer. But 25 kids and 25 mentors built useless boxes. And those are little plastic laser cut devices with a little switch. You flip it on, and all it does is a little arm comes out and turns itself off. So it's pretty useless. But we were glad to have the Godman Guild come home full circle to the previous building of the Godman Shoe Company. After the Godman Shoe Company, and before us, it was the 80 Faro Motorcycle Company. So 80 Faro is one of Harley's oldest dealerships, and we can see their dealership a couple blocks away. Mm-hmm. They had bought this building to make a kind of motorcycle mecca where they had about 20 or 30 bays where individual mechanics would customize bikes for customers. So if you think of like Salon Lofts is a popular business in town where if you're a stylist, you rent a chair or a booth in a larger building, and that was kind of the gig here. There was a decision in the family to relocate the whole business to, I think, 70 or 71.
Yeah, that is what they call it, Sunbury, or it's kind of Delaware, but it's north on 71, and they do have a giant building. It's a giant Harley dealership. Mm-hmm, it's amazing. I was there a couple months ago, before winter really set in. But then they do still have their sort of mini satellite one around here on Broad.
And and when they left, the city was afraid this building would turn to blight. This was 7 or 8 years ago, and
how long do you think it was unoccupied?
Oh, maybe so only 2 or 3 years. I think it was unoccupied since when 80 Faro left and before we moved in, but I'm not wholly sure what happened after the shoe company left in the when have you.
Yeah, when we came in here and you and I walked through before we owned it or any of that. We were just kind of looking through it, and there was just like a pile of bicycles, and there was just like no one had been on the second floor for a long time. It was certainly legally you could not have occupied the second floor. It had giant holes in the floor that were covered by like loose boards. There was maybe lights, electricity, I'm assuming, right? But
very small handful.
Yeah, it was dangerous to be on the second floor. Mm-hmm. Now the second floor is this beautiful co-working office space, but at the time, a wrong step would have taken you 20 feet to a concrete floor. I mean, it was intense. So things have changed a lot since then. Do you want to answer this question? Who actually owns the Idea Foundry? I'm sure you have an answer for that.
Yeah. So we all do. No. The original the business was started by myself, and it was a hobby business while I was still an engineer. And I originally rented a garage, bought a few woodworking tools, made a website, advertised on Craigslist for members, and for 2 years it was me and the wind and the mice, and no one came in.
Is that true? I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was. You and Levi came in.
At what point was that? I took a knife making class with Adlai, but in his driveway, in his garage.
Yeah, that's right. At his own house.
So how long?
Yeah, so from August 2008 is when I first started renting the space. I think the website went live maybe in November of 2008. And then it was maybe May, June 2010, so a little less than 2 years that we had been operating, but really losing my shirt. I was pretty much using my disposable income to subsidize the gig, and people who came to help out, members, were putting in so much volunteer time that I felt bad asking them for money too. They give me 5, 10, 20 hours a week of good, hard, back-breaking labor or talented machining, refab. So we had the burgeoning of a community, but no revenue model. And so after 2 years, it was either, okay, folks, this was cool, let's close up shop, or we become a private co-op. 4 or 5 people agree, we just split the bills 5 ways and we don't open the doors to the public, or we go bigger and expand to a space that we could carve out studios and rent studios for. And that was the decision we made. We went to corrugated, went from 2,400 square foot garage to a 10,000 square foot industrial complex.
You skipped Leonard. You're saying Leonard.
No, that is Leonard. Yeah,
okay,
the 2,400 square foot space.
That whole thing was Leonard. And there was at some point where you were thinking about closing shop or going bigger?
Yeah. Originally, I said, let's try this ridiculous adventure for 1 year. And if it's a huge success, then I'll quit my day job, do this full time. We all win. If it's a terrible failure, I'll say, well, I had some fun. Mm-hmm. Wait a quarter century until I retire, and then try it again.
Quarter century. I do remember a meeting. One of the first meetings that I went to as I'm involved rather than a student at one of the classes was. We were talking about moving. It was at Leonard, and we were talking about moving to the corrugated location, which was 1158.
True,
I'm sure you looked that up.
Good memory.
And well, it used to be my address in a sense,
Yeah.
So anyway, we were talking about moving there and who would have a studio. And then when we wound up getting a studio, we were me and my business partner, which was Refab, which is still a website, refabstudio.com, and all of us built out our own studios, but it was 2x4s and drywall, and we built the studio in this place at Corrugated, and then expanded, and then eventually got too big for our britches over there, and came over here. You didn't say how that part happened, but you did skip over who actually owns the idea.
So to be real strict, I was the 100% owner of the LLC that the Idea Foundry operates under. And then a year and a half ago, we were in a fundraising campaign to try to raise the monies to build out the second floor that Dylan mentioned was a nightmarish death trap. Not that bad, thanks to
it had potential.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And so during the fundraising, we had about a 15-person advisory board of people helping us to find sources for money. Now, since we're a for-profit social enterprise, it's a little awkward of an ask to go to AEP or Nationwide or Huntington and say, hey, kick in 100, 200K to line Alex's pockets and make him fat. And we were partnering with the Franklinton Development Association, which is the organization that owned the building, that invited us to Franklinton. And eventually, one of the people on that advisory board said, you know what, you're not a nonprofit. You don't need fundraising. You're a startup. You need investment. So that was Christopher Celeste, and thankfully he and his wife, Nancy Kramer, successful business people, techies, community folks, they have an angel investment company called Hatch, which stands for Help at the Critical Hour. And it also demonstrates what great marketing people they are. Kramer started Resource Amirati, which did a lot of marketing for Apple for many, many years. So they really know their stuff. And they provided some investment that gave them minority ownership of the business. And so I still have the majority ownership, but I'm grateful to give them a good chunk of the pie in exchange for their coaching, capital, and connections.
And that happened basically at the same time we moved to this building.
Yes. Well, sorry. No, we moved here in 2014 in April. And we were still burdened with the goal of trying to raise the revenue to build the second floor. So it was a bit of a Hail Mary where we decided to come to Franklinton and to commit to moving into a building that we weren't yet sure we could monetize. And so this has caused a little bit of heartburn about half a year back for some of our members. And this is an interesting peek behind the curtain here too, where it looked like we had a great business, it's thriving. We got hundreds of members. We've got interesting tools. Stuff is going. But the whole plan had been to build out the second floor, and that would be what would really be the way we'd generate most of our revenue here. So we had a tight timeline. We had about 12 months, 18 months to make that happen. And if it wouldn't have happened, then we wouldn't have been able to sustain the business. So now that thankfully we did get there, but we've tweaked a few prices very minorly. And we've had some members say, hey, I kind of liked it when it was just a quirky, mischievous club of folks. I'm like, yeah, but if I showed you our financial graph, we were aiming for the ground. We were so that was not a sustainable way to operate.
When I moved away 4 years ago or so. This is at the exact same time that you were talking about transferring. So if you said that's 2014, 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. When I left, moved to Florida and came back. When I did that, people would joke, "Oh, you should start an idea," because I was at the Idea Foundry 24/7, and so they said, "Oh, you should start your own Idea Foundry." I said, "I don't know if the Idea Foundry makes money," and so that was that time when it was. And we had talked earlier. We'll probably cut this video up a little bit to answer the question a little bit more concisely, if such a thing is even possible at this point. But I had talked about how physical items are hard to scale, and I think that's true also. It's hard to scale people that make physical items. There's literally only so much space. There's only 24 hours in a day to rent that tool. And obviously you can expand and get bigger tools and stuff like that, but or more tools or whatever it is, more efficient tools. But there's a real limit to renting those tools in that time. And obviously it's something that you value, or the Idea Foundry values to have available. But when it comes to scaling up, a place like this co-working space where we provide super fast internet, we have event space, we have classes, those things scale much easier and they have a broader reach. So,
and that's a really good point about. So I started this as a hobby business, and really didn't have a plan for how to make money, and that wasn't the original goal, and still isn't the driving motivator. But having said that, now having been compelled to write a couple of business plans and to have seen a number of businesses come and go, grow and succeed, or peter out and pivot, you can put together what I call the capital S spreadsheet. We have a 23-tab spreadsheet that has pretty much every product and every expense associated with Visual Basic slider knobs, so I can move a knob. And that says, okay, what if membership were $40 a month instead of $35 a month? How much more do we make? How much less? And if you look at the classrooms we have, the tools we have, the hours in the day, like you said, the event space we have, and you say, let's assume every classroom is full and we're teaching an optimal number of, say, 20 people per class, and we're generating XYZ revenue per student, which is something we've got some experience in, there is certainly a cap to what you can do with this building. And it was fascinating to me to undergo this mental financial exercise to see, oh, okay, so that's the most you can do here. And either we strive for that, and once we've made it, we say, hey, great, we've won. We've got a small cash flowing business for a handful of folks here in Columbus and a few hundred members in Central Ohio. Or after that, we pivot and we expand. Do we look to working in other cities? Do we look to work to become something like a media company or an e-learning company? And I see going down this list of Facebook questions.
Well, are you? I want to stay in that question.
Sure.
Are you saying the last part of that question was, what's the long-term vision once it's fully realized? Is that what you're tiptoeing around?
So
there's also one that asks, are there any plans to expand outside of Columbus further down? But
yeah.
Are you? I think we should answer that separately if we're going to.
So what are the long-term visions?
Yeah. What's the long-term vision once it's fully realized about the Idea Foundry? That's back to the original question.
Sure. This is a really interesting question too, because you can look at this, and we've talked about different horizons. What is your horizon for your goals for this week, next month, next year, next 10 years, next 100 years? And the problem right in front of our noses for the last few years has been, let's just cash flow. Let's just positively cash flow, make a few bucks. And I used to think our mission was to provide tool education and access to the Central Ohio tech and creative communities. About 3-4 years ago, I had an epiphany and realized, our driving goal should be to make money. And if we can make money, then we can execute that mission. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to sell ice cream and do whatever off-mission things, but pretty much everything we do has to be revenue-driven. We still want to be community-centric and donate and host events for folks who can't afford it otherwise, provide classes to people who can't afford it otherwise. But this is why we're a social enterprise and a for-profit. And it occurred to me years ago that we had the decision to be either a 501c3 educational nonprofit, and I thought we might call it Build Yourself, and we'd be the center of a ring of schools that didn't have wood shop, machine shop, metal shop, or the modern incarnations, laser cutter, 3D printer, CNC mill, have those students come here, do their stuff, or we go for profit. And Marvin Katz, our old landlord back at Leonard, who started the Buggy Works and a host of other places around Columbus, when I was talking to him about this, he said, well, what's wrong with making a buck? And I thought, you know what? Nothing, especially if you're executing a socially forward mission in an economically sustainable way, you win.
But I've always thought this. We're not talking. There's like capitalism with a big C gets a bad name, and business people, are always out to ruin the environment and just steal all the resources.
Whatever the market will bear.
Yeah. And that is not at all what you're talking about. What you're talking about is we can't do any of the good stuff we do if the building shuts down, if we shut down.
Sure.
Also, I think this in general, that companies that I like, that I find that I identify with their mission or I like what they make, or even people on YouTube that I think are doing well, I want them to do well. I don't mind giving them some of my money or being a member or partaking in their whatever services they offer because I want them to still be around. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's the exact thing where you can be sheepish about it, but just being out front, coming out front and saying, we need to make money for this thing to exist is more honest, I think, in some sense.
And there are all sorts of arguments you can make where this is a more efficient shared resource model than if each member were to buy their own tools, have a garage, they could do that. But the other comment I like, so Churchill called democracy the worst form of government except for all the rest. Mm-hmm. And I would submit that capitalism is the worst form of economy except for all the rest.
Yeah,
so it's what's working for us now. And similarly, this is how we operate. But I think to answer your question, long term, 1 year, 2 year, long term, if you call it that, is to just be on our feet, making money and sustaining our business so that we can do this for the next 10 or 20 years. I've joked that Willie Nelson was described as a 20-year overnight success. We're an 8-year-old, 9-year-old startup still because we've gone through a few phases. However, that's the goal for the business. The mission is, of course, to empower local creatives and techies, and I think we're split threefold. One, help people who are artisans, craftspeople, artists, because it's cool, it's interesting. I like that. We're good at it. People enjoy coming to the space and seeing people making stuff, but that is, as you pointed out earlier, hard to scale. The other, I feel that the compassionate application of technology is the greatest force multiplier for good on the planet. Clean electricity, clean water, free internet, cheap electronics to browse the web and crowdfund and design.
Like technological altruism.
I dig it. So in this regard, I like leaning on tech. So the second floor has a lot of offices in which we host tech companies. You mentioned a few before. And I think that will be a way for us. Some of them may really succeed, graduate out of here, and we hope they remember us when they're big and famous. Mm-hmm. And then the third is spreading the message. So that's the media component, the podcasting component, YouTube, Facebook. So if we can empower locally and inspire globally, then I think we put our chips on 2 or 3 very safe bets, empowering local artists and entrepreneurs so that we're a sustainable, interesting place in Columbus, pushing to tech, so hopefully that reaches the world, and then inspiring 1 million makers. And that has led me to the last real long-term goal. You familiar with the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal? Okay. Jim Collins said every company should have something almost outlandishly aspirational. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I'd love to see happen is a planet with 8 billion educated and empowered innovators. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can demonstrate that we as a community workshop here in Franklinton can educate and empower people to make art, to make apps, to make businesses, to have fun, to live their passions sustainably, then as this culture spreads, as cheap browsable devices, cheap phones become available, cheap electricity, cheap internet become available, and there are service bureaus where you can email a 3D file and they will mail you back a 3D printed part or a CNC machine part. You don't actually need access to the tools.
Right.
So if you look at Project Loon, which is Google's plan to provide Wi-Fi to the planet, they have it trialing in New Zealand with a fleet of hot air balloons that hover at 60,000 feet. It's higher than traffic. It's higher than weather. And then there's a device called the Ubi Slate. It's a $70 phablet, a phone and a tablet, available in India, but I'm sure it'll be available more broadly, where you can browse the web, and then the Gravity Light. That's Gravity Light. Sometimes I get excited and speak a bit quickly. Mm-hmm. It's a device to generate electricity just by picking up a big heavy bag and letting it fall. So that, I think, you can see roots to educating and empowering the planet. And as the next 25 years, give us a disruptive era in automation, robotics, economics. That's doom and gloom, a little bit scary, but I think by having a planet of empowered innovators, that's a pretty good army to tackle any problem the planet throws at us. So I think once the business is up and running, I'd like to talk more about that.
Yes, and I think that is great as a huge goal, the BHAG, because there's a lot of things where people talk about global warming or trash or overpopulation or some weird like planetary problem, and they just say someone will fix it. Someone will figure that out. And not if we don't have the right education, or not if we aren't empowering people to be innovators. So it's like seeding that the eventual proliferation of the human race.
And to this deserves to be its own podcast soon. But right now, I would opine that if you add all the engineers, all the software developers, all the industrial designers, the people who I would submit are making technical value, cars, computers, software, that's a tiny fraction of the total global talent pool. And the way this works, if you're born lucky, you have good parents who push you to a good school, you go to a good college, you get an interesting degree, you work for a good company that puts you in a position where you can make and design products, you push them to the market, and then some people can buy those things. But if you have a great idea, or if there's a market need, if there's a social need that can be addressed by technology, for which there is no market drive. No one's going to make a buck if you solve it. No one's going to do that. So if you take a step back and look at the nature of innovation in the market, the things that are available on Amazon or Walmart or Target are the things that address that cycle of need and design, but there is a much broader long tail. And we're starting to see people who are designing, crowdfunding, manufacturing, and solving their own social needs, clean water, clean electricity, better communications themselves. And that is effing exciting.
Yeah, clean water specifically, I know is a major problem. All right, well, let's answer one more question. You did say earlier that you had to go at 3:30. Is that true?
They canceled. I've got a 4 o'clock now.
Yeah, well, I have a need to end sooner than that. So unless you want to pause and come back to it.
I'd be happy to do that. And this is the same reason you've paused?
Yeah. No, and we're back. So what I wanted to do was, I guess we should go in order. The next question I want to talk about is Callie, who does a lot of our photography and stuff.
She's our media and production staff person at the time.
That's a much better title than what I said, photography and stuff. Anyway, I love to hear people's titles. Like when you just said Nick's title, I was like, oh yeah, that is kind of what he does. He's like tech guru. He's VR and 3D and all that stuff. So anyway, what Callie does is, say it again?
She's our media and production person at the Idea Foundry.
So she asked, because I know this is something that that's on her mind, because she works with Franklin Fridays. She did I saw just a second ago that she had done the website or was heavily involved in doing the website.
Yeah, she did it.
And she wants to know, what role does the Foundry play in the community of Franklinton and Columbus?
And I'll quickly tack on, she's our media and content production person.
Right.
And I'll be succinct. I'll try to keep each of these answers to 60 seconds. But
that's fine.
Of course, there's no short answer. Because of the model that we described just a few minutes ago, that we're a social enterprise and hence need to charge for our services, this means we can only address a certain sliver of people who can come in, afford a $100 welding class, afford the $50 or $60 a month to be a member, and afford the $15 an hour welding fee per hour. That means that K-12 schools, a bunch of people who don't have that disposable income are cut off from our services. And I feel like if we can provide access to people who don't have access to this kind of stuff, then everyone wins. So we want to open the doors more widely to the local Franklin community. We're glad that they opened their doors to us. And we're finding that some of the ways to do this are through third-party groups like the Columbus Foundation or Nationwide, who have kicked us some bucks to subsidize access, whether it's classes, membership, or what have you, so that groups like the United Schools Network, which is a collection of charter schools, 2 in Franklinton, 1 in Old Town East, they can bring their 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students in and learn 3D printing, learn how to fly drones, So in this regard, we're serving as the kind of high-tech, quirky workshop that might inspire you into a world of art and tech that you might not have had in your school, at your Boys and Girls Club, in your living room. And I'm grateful that we're discovering ways to provide access to people who might not otherwise have it. So I think our role for the very broad community is just providing access to and education on all of our interesting resources so that people can discover whether they have a talent or passion for a variety of things. And we're looking at ways to do that.
Something you made me think of was that there's Franklinton Friday nights, and obviously it sounds like you can go to that website, which I don't really actually know what it is. I guess I can find that in 2 seconds here. FranklintonFridays.com. Man, I'm good at the internet. So anyway, it reminded me that my niece, who goes to Brown Elementary, which is in Hilliard, they are doing a thing tonight where they made some art pieces with. They're clearly not a disadvantaged part of the town, but they don't have. I don't know if they would have otherwise had access to this kind of stuff, and they certainly haven't been to the Idea Foundry. I know my niece hasn't, but they're taking just what John Knoll from Knoll Doubt, pretty cool name for his business. He makes a bunch of stuff on the laser. He makes, I think he does shop art as well, but anyway, it creates waste, where you've got sort of the negative image of all the things he's cut out. And so he was thinking there's got to be something cool that these kids can do with this. And my niece in particular, I know that I'm sure a lot of the other kids in her class are similar to her, but she wants to be an inventor. We asked her what do you want to be when you grow up, and she said an inventor. And she's got a couple of quirky inventions that are in her head and stuff, and she wants to improve things. So this is a perfect thing for her to be involved in. I know people her age, kids her age. So they have done art projects. They've made some sculptures out of the basically the drop cuts, but the byproduct of what he makes. So that's something where people are involved. And what they're doing tonight is they're coming in and they're doing our standard demos that they do. We call them make and takes, but sometimes you can make things and you get to go home with something. And one of those is a Harry Potter wand. And she is a huge Harry Potter fan. And so I know that the kids her age, maybe it's showing up, but there's some airplane traffic going on. But or was that a train?
I thought it was a train.
Oh, you're probably right. So I like the train. Hey, man.
I do too.
I think it's a cool background. But anyway, so they are doing something tonight with that, and they're making Harry Potter wands. They're doing drone races. They're also doing virtual reality demonstrations. Virtual reality is one of those things where it blows your mind. I mean, the first time you do it, it's come a long way since I did it in 1992, and we were doing all these crazy polygons and stuff like that. But it is fantastic these days, and there's a lot of cool applications to that that people get exposed to. So I think that's a good answer to that question: how we do Franklinton and how we help Franklinton in this community. An interesting thing was, Casey answered this. Casey, tell me her. Every time I bring up someone who works here, you tell me their title.
Casey McCarty is our Chief Operating Officer.
Okay, so Blake asked how many classes have been taught at the Idea Foundry, and she says 56 in the month of February alone. So she must have been had that data available.
She's very proud of that. She also serves as our class coordinator, so she coordinates between all the instructors. People who know me know I like to say nothing's easy. Getting in trouble is easy. Everything else is hard. So I'm glad for Casey to make a lot of these things easier for us.
Let's see.
Before we go on, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to better answer Callie's question. I specifically answered.
You said 60 seconds. I thought that was very ambitious. Let me try to answer this in 60 seconds. It's been 6 minutes.
This is extemporaneous also. I'm sorry this question is so long. So what role does the Foundry play in Columbus as well? I would submit that back in the day, you had the village blacksmith, and that's where people go and make stuff. And because everyone hung out in the same spot, you get the farmer talking to the blacksmith, talking to the merchant. And a lot of this has been made more efficient recently thanks to industrialization over the last 100 years. So you don't have as much of the people talking to each other who don't normally talk to each other because it's cheaper to have a manufacturing line. It's cheaper to have a single distribution place. Now we're seeing this return to a single center where artists and engineers and students and teachers and marketing and biz dev and media people get together. And that is creating something that's greater than the sum of the parts because you do have people who are producing these creative collisions as a result of just being under one roof. And Steve Jobs famously, I don't know how true this is, but it's purported that he designed the offices for Pixar to have all the bathrooms in one place. So the artists and the tech software people who normally are like oil and water actually had a place to congregate and ideas happen. So I think we're seeing we're the bathroom of Columbus, and I hope that's the soundbite that starts the podcast, where everyone's colliding and great things are happening.
There we are. We are Columbus's bathroom. There is there is so much more conversation happening about this than I ever thought, and I'm finding it. I want to listen to you, and I'm trying to read it. And there's a thread on here where I'm not even sure I can read this in a efficient way and still have things keep going. I know Rebecca asked about. She doesn't have a title. Does she have a title? She's an intern.
Yes, she's she has the title of the intern who has traveled the furthest to join us. She came all the way from Ireland after reading an article about us in Atlantic Monthly.
Oh, I had no idea. I did not know that. I was always wondering how she found her way here. Yeah. But yeah, she's Irish and she has a lovely Irish accent and a lot of fun stories.
A brogue.
Yeah, and so she asked. She said she just wanted to know about member stories and how makers how members became them, or how people became makers. And then there are a lot of interesting folks here and origin stories. So I think that we will address that. I'm always talking about that. The title that I think about that in my brain is called Meet Your Maker. But I think that that's the kind of thing where we eventually want to showcase people. Callie's done a little bit of that, where you see these videos of people and the things they've made, and they talk
so
about
did Will before her, and hell, I think you guys did back in the day too.
Yeah, it started out clunkily as a sort of blog post thing. I really, as a website person, I've completely gone away from blog only content. I just feel like I can't imagine just slogging through the blog. So I think that those are much better as a podcast video or a video only or something like that. I've got an idea that we'll eventually do that, but that is something we definitely want to address in the future. Obviously not something we could just rattle off a bunch of origin stories here in this specific format right now. How about you answer Chet's getting a lot of traffic here because he was just like right online at the exact moment we started this, but he wants to know what's your idea of the ideal member. And while you're answering that, I'm going to read this long thread.
Sure. So the first reaction I have to this question is a little bit of discomfort because I don't want to exclude anyone who's interested in becoming part of the community, and I'm very proud that we have a space where complete beginners, complete noobs like I was when I started this gig can come in and feel warm and welcome. My dad ran a restaurant, so I feel like the Idea Foundry is a machine shop with a maitre d' to feel warm and welcome, hospitable, demystify the tools. So there's no ideal person, but I'll say there's an ideal attitude. And the ideal attitude might be someone who's respectful, someone who's socially interested in hanging out in a community. You don't have to be the life of the party, but hermits don't do very well here. But then you have an interest in learning something that either will become a hobby of yours or potentially a value skill that you can use to make a few bucks or to allow you to quit your day job. But it's a culture of self-improvement, and it's a culture of paying it forward. So once you know something, you're happy to share it with other people. And I have been really shocked when we first started advertising for members. It was on Craigslist 9 years back. I put an ad in the artists section of the Columbus, Ohio Craigslist page and said, if you're interested in learning tools and teaching a trade and hanging out with like-minded folks, and again, I feel uncomfortable saying the phrase like-minded, but that's how I define that kind of culture, then drop me a line. And I thought since we're advertising on Craigslist, we were going to get a lot of crazies. And I thought we'd have to have a sign on the door saying, forgive me, we're on radio, no dicks allowed. Like a few apples will spoil the barrel. And then one of the very first few people who came in the door was Ethan. And he brings a hell of a lot of value. He brings 3D printing. He's helped us win a number of international awards. And I told him the story. I thought, wow, I'm
You're
really
talking about
impressed.
Ethan. You're talking about Ethan Dix.
Yes,
Right, okay.
yes, and that's why I'm saying the story is like I thought we'd have to have a sign
no
on the door,
dicks. Ha.
and he hands me his business card and it says, "Hey," and it says Ethan Dix. I'm like, okay, I'm eating my words.
Yeah.
So I've often marveled at the caliber of folks.
Sorry to jump your punchline there. I just was like, why didn't he say his whole name?
Yep.
Okay.
And so I've marveled a bit at the psychology of our community, and 400, 500 members. Everyone has a 24/7 key and code. I have asked for only maybe 5 to be returned because it just didn't work out. That's about a 1% hit rate, 99% hit rate. I said, what is it about this culture that attracts people, self-selects people who are sociable, technically talented, pay it forward, proactive?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if you want to make things, you can buy a few tools and put it in your basement or garage. But if you're community forward, you're going to come here. If you like teaching, you're going to teach. If you like taking classes, you're going to do that. So I think when you raise your flag and say, this is what we do, really fantastic people are attracted to it. So I think that's our ideal member, someone who has a curiosity to learn something new, likes to teach it to others once they have it, and they get along well with others.
Yeah. It's interesting that I sense you're trying to avoid saying a specific person or anything
It's
like
Dylan.
that.
I'll just say it.
The other day, come on. The other day I was saying that, or I was thinking that about Corey Parks.
Oh, yeah.
He's one of our, okay, what's his title?
Yeah, I'm not even sure. Oh, actually, he does. He's, I think, he's Master of Mischief.
Really?
Yeah. He's handling our front of house.
But he is super friendly. He is just a very nice guy. He seems like a smart guy, but he's funny because I talked to him a couple of times, and then all of a sudden I see his face on my Facebook feed, and he's doing a live concert at this other. Well, we just happen to have a relationship with them, but at Pursuit, who I've worked with in the past, and they've been friends of the Idea Foundry since the beginning.
And what does Pursuit do?
Pursuit is a pop-up suit store, but then eventually they realized, it's kind of cool to have a permanent location, so they're both permanent and pop-up. But they sell suits mostly to like college kids, stuff like that. They're on the inexpensive side, but they're definitely nice suits. And they have their own line now, and they've just been super successful. But they have a cool store, and I built a bunch of their original stuff. Levi and I, my business partner, a bunch of their pop-up themed crate style, I don't know what you call it, fixtures in their store. Anyway, I see that Corey's having a concert there, so he did a live concert there in their place. They kind of do a regular thing where if there's a traveling band in town or whatever, and they're they fit their whatever general demographic, they have live concerts in there. So I thought, I didn't even know that about him. And then the other day I showed him around the podcasting equipment. He's like, I just want to make more things. I just want to do stuff. I want to know all this stuff. So someone who has a desire, a hunger to know more things is going to fit right in at the Idea Foundry.
And I think that's, I also sometimes feel uncomfortable drawing this analogy. I used to think that the real model that we're aspiring towards is a gym where you have tools, you have members who come in here. Actually, it's a lot closer to a church because it's a physical facility, it's a community, it's people who are bound by a common goal to improve themselves and to give back. And one of the things I treasure most about our community, and I've heard this from a few people saying, hey, I've met people here I never would have intersected with in my social circle. And we see that here too. So, but I've wondered, why is it those people who never, might run into each other at work or at a social function, why are they talking? It's because they like learning and they like making things.
Yeah. Okay, I think that answers that question pretty well, but nothing groundbreaking there. I mean, if you like to make things, the place where we make things, a maker space.
And you're kind of friendly. If you're not an asshole and you like to make things.
If you're not a friendly person in general, I think that in my experience that's been a vicious cycle, if you will, or whatever, a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's just if you have a negative attitude and you're unfriendly to people won't want to talk to you,
mm-hmm.
and then you'd just be generally unhappy because you don't have no friends and no one wants to talk to you. So it's like, just be a better person. Don't be a jerk. In general. Then when you figure that out, come to the Idea Foundry. So I have to paraphrase this big, long, a lot of text, TLDR, if you will. So I've read it, so you don't have to. But there is a question on the it was I don't know how to pronounce this guy's last name, but it's Alex Farcione?
Yes.
Is it fancier than that?
I think that's how it
Farcione. Anyway, so he wanted to know, just in general, I have to paraphrase this. It's about franchising. And then when he says when people come from out of town, they want to say, oh, man, I wish I had this. We touched on this a little bit ago where I talked about, what if there was one in Florida? That was something I really missed in Florida was there's nothing like the Idea Foundry there, at least where I was, which was in Fort Myers. And then Zach wanted to talk about, he sort of added on to that, what is the difference? What is the reason that, what's the special sauce? What's the reason that we are successful here? You touched on that a little bit. I think some of the success of what the Idea Foundry, let me answer a little bit or whatever, or a guess on it, paraphrase what you'd said earlier, but a little bit of what makes the Idea Foundry successful at the moment is some of its luck, some of its timing. The Franklinton Development Association, which is now rebranded as Fuel, had a big part in why we're here in this building. They really wanted us to be here. They were making Franklinton the cool community it honestly is now. And so that happened to be about the same time we were really ready to expand at the last building. And then you talked about the investment coming at the right time, and that's important. But these guys, I have to paraphrase their things, and I feel like you'll be able to answer this in an interesting way. But they are guessing that it's you, Alex Bandar, is the reason that the Idea Foundry is unique. The Columbus Idea Foundry in Columbus is unique, and why they're even, if I'm able to just paraphrase what their thoughts are, is, can it work in another city without you? Is it replicable? Can someone else do this kind of thing in another city, or what do you think it takes? What is unique about you and the Idea Foundry?
Yeah, so we're giving up on the 60-second response.
Go ahead. Yeah, no way.
I'll first
say
it
was a 60-second question.
Yeah, I know. It's at least a 2-minute answer. First off, never wanted this gig to be the cult of Alex. So I'm flattered to hear some of that stuff, but we'll back up and go all the way around the world on this. When I was a kid, a million years ago, there was a really interesting book of, I don't know even why I was reading this, like cons and scams. And it may have been more like riddles, but so I'm going to go backwards here. Say you get a phone call 10 o'clock at night. This is in the 40s and 50s when horse racing is really popular. And someone says, they just jump right in the phone and said, hey, tomorrow Mama's baby is going to win at the horse track. And they hang up. I'm like, what the? Okay. And then for giggles, you check the paper, and sure enough, it won. And the next Friday night, 10 o'clock, your phone rings and says, hey, Daddy's boy is going to win tomorrow. And they hang up, and you check the paper, and sure enough, they won again. And then the third time, next Friday, it calls and say, hey, if you want the answer tomorrow, drop $100 in this post office box. And so you go and you do that, and of course, you never get a call again. And you think, well, how did this person predict these winners? Now, there might be 6 horses in a race, another 6 horses the next race. That's 36 possible chances to predict the winner of the second race. Now what you do is you call 60 people the first time, and you say, hey, tomorrow horse 1's going to win. Then you call the other 6, and you say horse 2 will win. So you're missing. Then you only call back the people for whom you got the first one right. And then you do the same thing. You say, you tell 80% of them the other ones are going to win. And so it looks like to the one for whom you picked right, you guessed right, it looks like you got it. So now if we look at maybe 1,000 efforts around the U.S. over the last 10 years of people who wanted to start community workshops or maker spaces, some of them may have had a benefactor who would pay a few bucks. Some of them might have had a nonprofit organization that had a great building that offered them. Others, like Franklinton, was part of what's called the East Franklinton Community District Plan, which was a plan put together by a master developer called Goody Clancy. And Goody Clancy is a huge developer. They've done the Boston Harbor. They've done the Baltimore Harbor. They're great at taking warehouse-laden spaces and making them into kind of commercial retail properties. They put together a plan that was paid for by the city of Columbus a few years ago. That plan was the #1 plan for 2014 for the American Planning Association and the Urban Land Institute. 2 separate groups both voted that as the #1 plan. So there are powers that be that we just got super lucky aligning with. And I like to say, the secret to our success has been hard work and luck, and not in that order. You can work hard your whole life and never get lucky. So there were those opportunities. Then when I thought any city with 250,000 people or more, you're going to find 50 geeks who like 3D printing and robotics and laser cutting. So it wasn't a surprise to me that we got 50 or so people to congregate. But then when Make Magazine started hosting competitions to say, which city around the world can bring the most people together to do 3D printing, robotics, laser cutting, Ethan Dix spearheaded the effort to really put this together. And 300 cities competed: San Francisco, London, Singapore, New York. We threw our hat in the ring, and we came in first in the world, 3D printing, first in the world, electronics and programming, first in the world for pyrotechnics, thanks to Jamie Dimon and his flares. Second for robotics, but we sponsored a high school robotics team that came in first in the world in their own 3,000 school competition. The final was in Australia. So this made me take a step back, say, what is it about Columbus? Because it wasn't me proper, it wasn't Ethan proper doing these things, it was the people in Columbus. And if you look at Ohio, it's the second highest manufacturing employment state after Michigan, thanks to the auto industry. It's also got a huge informatics industry. So nationwide's, Huntington, you've got banks, you've got insurance companies, you've got OCLC, which is the library service that maintains things like Google Scholar. You've got Patel, which is a 75-year-old brilliant engineering consulting firm. You have OSU, one of the largest universities in the nation, in the world. So you have a combination of people who are both historically great at making things and pretty damn tech savvy. And then you throw the demographic mix. Columbus is one of the best demographics of the U.S. So you got a great mix of different types of folks. So you have a really fertile substrate, and then you had these really lucky happenstances. Then, okay, let's take the Alex component. So I'm kind of smart. I'm kind of a nice guy. I'm a people pleaser. I'm pretty hardworking. And so I surround myself by people who are that also. So if you get 10, 20, 50, 100, 400, 500 people who are pretty smart, pretty nice, pretty hardworking, pay it forward, that is a hell of a nucleus to create a facility like this. So I think that the long and the short of it is Ohio was the right place. Columbus was the right place. There was a guy crazy enough like myself to throw my day job salary for 5 or 6 years into this gig. And it happened to happen at a moment where 3D printing, open source software, YouTube, the world's university, were all coming together. So that sparked by the apocryphal story of me getting embarrassed by my sister's arts students when I found out they were all better welders and machinists than I. There have been a few epiphanous moments that made me think, oh, wait, I'd rather have access to that and a building and a community to have fun in. So not a simple answer, but hopefully you can tease some of the rationale out there.
No, I agree. I think that in summary, some of it is the fact that it's a confirmation bias. This is a successful one, so we can sort of look back and see what was successful about it. But history is written by the winners in a sense. Not that by any means you consider this thing to be done or we're sitting back on our laurels. I know that talking with you personally a lot about this kind of stuff, this just still seems like the beginning. We just got the second floor up and running a couple months ago, maybe 3 months ago, and maybe 2 really running. But you still don't consider it to be like humming on all cylinders. It's this, and I don't think the whole building. We're certainly not running at peak efficiency or anything. It's not sit back and pat ourselves on the back time by any means. Also, yes, I think Columbus is great, but I think there are a lot of places like this. Columbus is always on the list for smartest city. We have a lot of universities. We have Ohio State as a big place. I also think that in general, you started the Idea Foundry, and we talked about that earlier about the history of the Idea Foundry, but you started this in the right way to be successful, whereas from the ground up, you didn't just get whatever $1 million loan and buy a building. You really didn't have the whatever foundation to support. You did it the other way around. You were in a garage. You were doing classes in people's houses we built a community first, and then once the thing was grassroots sustaining itself, and you grow in stages. So when I think sometimes people fail is the idea gets so big it collapses under its own weight. And so what these guys are sort of hinting at on the Facebook comments were, why doesn't this work in other cities or whatever? And I think sometimes that could be, you've seen Tech Shop, you've seen these larger maker spaces, and you think, well, I could do this. Let's just get a giant loan, and you maybe have never even done it. So you learn how to do it, and then eventually, it's the overnight success of 8 years or whatever. Sure. You can look at this and think, oh, the Idea Foundry is such an overnight success, but yeah, it's because this is the 8th year that really it's been functioning. So there's a little bit of all those things happening. But I personally, and I'm sure you would say this, that I don't think it is Alex dependent. I think that right person, but I don't even think it's that narrowed down on the one person. This could certainly, the idea behind a makerspace or a similar Idea Foundry could be 3 people that are doing it. It could be a small group, though some of that makes it difficult. I know that you originally sort of did start with a small group, and there can be conflicting ideas about how big is this thing, what is the future of this thing. So if all those people are on the same page, there's no reason it has to be Alex, and it's certainly not. This is funny because I know you know that I think a lot about you, but this is not the only way that this can happen.
Sure.
That's silly to say.
And right back at you, buddy. But it's funny when I'll be most proud when I used to say get hit by a bus, and the whole thing is continuing. I mentioned this to a friend of mine who runs his business. And he said, yeah, I want my business to be able to manage to run without me too, but it's not because I'm afraid of getting hit by a bus. I want to move to Hawaii, live on a beach, and I still want to collect a paycheck. So It's funny. There are different motivations for having an organization stand up and, like you say, hum on all cylinders for the good long while. That would be, I think that is, we talked earlier, someone was talking about what the dream is and it's fully realized. But I think from a personal perspective, I don't know if you really do want this, but that's a fine. I think that's a good goal. Is you would want this place to be. If you weren't here for a month, it's not like you come back and the building's abandoned and it looks like the apocalypse in here. I think you would want, and I know that when you first started talking, it's like whenever they get a question like this, you want to dance around being arrogant, and I feel like I can take a little bit of that pressure off of you because I'm not you, and I could say that I know that you personally. Put a lot of effort into empowering the other people at the Idea Foundry, some of whom we've already mentioned, but empowering them to function without you. Is that you don't need to have Alex's approval for every little decision, and you're here because you're good at this, and you want to let those people do what they would do otherwise. And half of that is because people like Matt and Casey just identify problems and solve them before they even make their way up, and that's a huge privilege. The second thing is Christopher Celeste, our investor partner, has been encouraging us to kind of evolve in that way. What was the reason you said this metaphor the other day? Is you said the genius with 1,000 helpers or whatever. Yeah, I think that's a Jim Collins management guru from Stanford who wrote a number of books, including Good to Great, and he analyzed quantitatively the management techniques of successful and unsuccessful companies. And I think one of the turns of phrase that he picked was the genius with 1,000 helpers, and that'll get you so far, but then you're bottlenecked. Right, sounds great right up until that guy gets hit by a bus or whatever. I mean, you think or the same burned thing. Out or you think the same thing about Tesla. What if he goes crazy and falls in love with a pigeon? Does his workshop completely fall apart? And the answer is yes. There is no, well, other than the car, which is just using its name, there is no Tesla workshop to this day. And in theory, if you were to go away, he could still function without you. Hopefully, yeah. I'm not sure that we could do that today, but hopefully that's the case. And I do think that where did he specifically? Zach's always asking about Iowa because that's where he's from. Yeah. But he wanted to know, hey, why couldn't this function in Iowa? And I feel like they absolutely could. There's no reason why they need to find their Alex Bandar and pin all their hopes on him. I don't know if I have another one. I guess that. We are coming up on 4 o'clock, so that's when you said. So I guess that's all our questions. What the eventual goal of this whole thing is, I feel like maybe based on what we had done here, but I would love to do this live on Facebook. Yeah. And just answer questions right as they come in, and
That sounds like the way to go.
And I think we're learning too why these shows have producers. So now, if we're trying to read it and answer at the same time, it's really interesting. Learning.
Yeah, in theory, we could have that too, where someone the only reason is a short one sentence question is easy to read and answer on the fly. I can still listen to you while that's happening, but these these guys got into a whole conversation here where you really have to sit down and read and kind of paraphrase what they're doing to make it into a useful question. But I think that will be great in the future. I'd like to do it. So, all right, we'll cut it there.